Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. The mad world of digital marketing agencies, creative agencies of any kind. I have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Robert Patin, author of The Agency Blueprint and The Practical Agency. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, David.
So you have a very interesting circuitous path to the work that you're doing today. I would love you to spend just a couple of minutes. Tell us about the Robert Patin backstory. What was the journey that brought you to the work that you're doing today? And then we'll jump in from there.
Sure. So it was kind of a meandering story, I think, like many people, right? So back when I was in my late teens, considering what I wanted to actually do and go to school for, I actually decided to do something that was kind of the antithesis to who I was as a person, right? I'm a very type A analytical person and decided to get an art degree and went into commercial photography. It was a hobby, a passion, something that I really loved, but something that I didn't really consider as a career at the time. And then ended up deciding to take that and get a fine art degree. Did that for a number of years after college and grew a photography business actually to a fair size and successful, but then realized I hated it and could not. If I was shooting lots of weddings, lots of portraiture and things like that. And I realized that if I had to tell someone to kiss one more time, that I was going to shoot myself. And so I decided that I couldn't do that, wasn't really for me. And then went into accounting and into public accounting. I'd grown up from the age of 13 years old, was doing bookkeeping for my dad and taxes for my dad, and since he was a CPA. And so I got an accounting job and eventually actually landed myself at a marketing agency and found that to be the sort of perfect mix between the creative outlet that I really enjoyed and had developed and went to school for, and the analytical piece that was just like the innate part of my characteristic of who I am as a person, and being able to have a very close association to creative people that I really enjoyed and a creative outlet, and being able to be part of that work, but utilizing what I was sort of born with, and that analytical, data-driven person that I am, and found a way to help creatives be able to do what they do best.
And then since then, because initially one of your business models, I think, was kind of fractional CFO for agencies.
Correct. Yep. And so we still do that to a degree, but only as a revenue share and equity model. So we have 3 different models that we work with agencies. The first of which is a group-oriented consulting program where we provide them with sort of the best tactics and practices for agencies and allowing for them to have the support. So my foundational principle is that about 95% of what agency owners need to do is first understanding what is the right next thing that they need to be doing, and then taking sort of best practice and implementing it into their agency, but having the support to be able to augment that best practice to fit who they are, who their agency is, what their services are, and ultimately who their client is. So having the support to allow for it to be augmented and fit them appropriately. I'm not the sort of dogmatic, hey, copy and paste type person. I just don't believe that works. It'll work to a fashion, but it only takes you so far. So that's the group-oriented consulting program. And then we work with agencies that are 2+ million. We actually work with and consult with the executive leadership to help them scale to 8 figures. And the fractional CFO is an invite only, where I actually sit on the executive team as the CFO of the agency.
Gotcha. Now, we need to back up the truck just for a quick second. When you back up the truck, it sounds like this. Beep, 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 beep. So your company name is Creative Agency Success. And there are some creative agency owners, of course, listening. For the folks that don't know what a creative agency is, are we talking about a digital marketing agency? Are we talking about a web design firm, ad agency, branding firm? What's the purview of that umbrella creative agency?
So predominantly, it's going to be anything that's design oriented, right? So it's going to be branding, design studios to web design studios to even potentially some social media, videography and photography, right? So it's primarily oriented towards anything design oriented or creation oriented. The sort of digital marketing umbrella, right, covers the gamut of tons of different things. What I would say is that it's everything that's creative and not really associated with any digital ad buying or traditional media buying. That's not a core area of expertise. Not saying I can't help the creative end of your business, assuming that you have that piece of it, but I am not the ad buying expert.
Yes, of course, of course. So let me ask you this, because this world can sometimes be perceived, especially by the owners and the practitioners of it, that this is a world where we pitch. We pitch work, we do the dog and pony show. We say, I'm a commodity agency, just like all the other commodity agencies that you're talking to, but somehow we're awesome. We're special. We are fantastically different by being exactly the same. And well, there's two things embedded in that question, I guess. One is this construct of the pitch and pitching. Second is, how do you decommoditize the agencies that you like to work with that are your clients? And what kind of crazy stuff do they need to stop doing? And what kind of smart things do they need to start doing? That's like 17 questions, but pick that up anywhere you like, anywhere you want, Robert, anywhere you want to start.
Well, let's start with the pitch. So what I would say is that and I would imagine many listeners, right, and maybe including you too, David, have watched the show Mad Men, right, where you have this traditional ad creative agency that is going through this big sort of traditional agency pitch. And 9 out of 10 times when I first start working with an agency, that's how they see the world. That they're going through, and I can't tell you how many times I've watched an agency sales recording and looking and watching. And when I'm watching these, I'm obviously listening to what the agency is saying, but I'm more often actually paying to how the prospect is actually engaging in the conversation, which is ultimately the most important piece. And more often than not, including sitting in the room when I was internal at agencies, you would see the prospect and you'll actually see them sort of cross their arms, kind of lean back in their chairs and almost look like they're going to sleep. And the agency at the end of this conversation will leave the room where we nailed it. It was phenomenal and just excited. And so they're sure that they're going to win the pitch. And I'm like, you clearly weren't looking at who was on the other end of that call or on the other end of that table. You bored them to all hell. So there's this construct and idea in this space that you actually have to pitch. You go through this hour-long presentation as to why your agency, why you do what you do, and how it's important and how you're going to help them. And you're trying to convince them, right? And I don't think that that's how sales work. And I know for myself, anytime I've been in a sales conversation, one that turns me off, right? We have built-in abilities as human beings to actually try to avoid being sold. So when you're pitching and you're trying to convince your prospect, it actually creates the exact opposite of what they're looking to accomplish, right? I'm sure that you know this in a sales conversation. It's not exclusive to this industry, but the thing that this industry does so much is this really long oriented pitch. And quite frankly, you think that you're doing something that is special and different, but it sounds almost exactly the same as every other pitch that they've heard. And
now, I'm curious, I apologize for interrupting. You know, sometimes people say, I don't mean to interrupt. In this case, I did mean to interrupt. So I know if you watch the show Mad Men, part of that pitch is also some creative ideas, what we call today free consulting in the 21st century. Is that still part of it? Like, oh, we have this idea, we have this vision, we're going to take you here, we're going to do this, we're going to do all these things. And now they're getting free ideas as well as the commoditized pitch. Is that still part of the deal?
In a lot of instances, yes, not every agency is still doing concept work. And I'm super anti the idea of concept work in the first place, right? Because I actually have a lot of my clients kind of talk about the idea of concept work because some agencies are still doing it. In a lot of instances, when you do the concept work and assuming that subjectively the prospect actually enjoys that work, then that agency does sometimes end up being chosen. But the thing that I will have clients actually talk about is the fact that that concept work is actually done with zero research, zero data, no information. And so this agency is going in completely blind and has invested a lot of money and time into that concept work. So it's costing you money. The agency that's doing is costing you money. It's actually at a risk because it's purely subjective, right? The client doesn't know why, doesn't know how, and it's just whether they like it or not. And that's one of the things that I was sort of going to talk about, of the idea of actually removing subjectivity from the work that you're doing in the first place. But that concept work is still something that happens quite a lot. But actually letting the client know that that agency is actually going to try to sell you on that concept work after they sign up, right? And it's not done with the proper data. It's not done with the research, and ultimately is likely not going to accomplish your goal. And they're going to be advising you in the wrong direction. So if they are showing you concept work, you need to be very careful and make sure that you're communicating with that agency that you want to start fresh. And so there's so many instances where clients of mine have actually had that conversation and end up winning the pitch over the agency that showed the concept work, because ultimately it wasn't in the client's best interest in the first place.
Yes, for sure. Now, I'm sorry, you were going to go on about pitching versus the right way to have a business development conversation, or even just some of the other bad habits that agency owners have and bad behaviors when they're in this convincing mode.
So the overarching concept that I would say, and how I've actually heard it put best, and I'm going to actually borrow from Blair Enns, who wrote the book Win Without Pitching. He talks about it in the context of a doctor, right? That you may, and many of us likely, have gone online to look up symptoms before going into a doctor, right? Let's say that you actually went to the physician after having figured out and diagnosed yourself as to what you believe that you have. And you go into the doctor and say, hey, I have XYZ, just give me ABC script. And the doctor's not going to be, yeah, okay, sure, and just write the prescription, right? Like that's not what the doctor's going to do, at least not an ethical one. And yet agencies do exactly that. The client will come to you and say, hey, I need this, this, and this. And the agency says, sure, here's the cost. Without actually finding out what is the reason, what is the why they're having that problem, what are they looking to accomplish, and being prescriptive. In the context of the doctor conversation, the doctor would say something along the lines of, you could be right, but if you wouldn't mind, let me double check and see and confirm what you believe to be true. And then we can talk about what next steps are. And that's essentially the same thing that an agency should be doing, is actually being prescriptive. Learn about the client, find out where they've been, where they're going, why they're having that problem, and why they even believe that that potential solution is the right one. And then actually tell them how and why. And if they're wrong, tell them why they're wrong and what actually works better for them, and what you've learned in the process and the expertise that you've gained over the years that you've been doing the work that you've been doing.
Hey, if you're loving this episode as much as I am, pop over to doitmarketing.com/manifesto and get your free 37-page download guide to how to sell smarter, sell more easily, sell more often. That's what we're here to help you with at The Selling Show. Off you go. The great thing about that, Robert, is that the agency principals that are doing it the way you're talking about, they're really going into that sales conversation as a peer, right? They're not going in as a peddler. There's no dog and pony show. There's no, and again, I love the doctor analogy. Imagine going into the doctor's office and the doctor suddenly says, hey, you know what I got? I got some red pills and some green pills and some yellow pills, and you should see what the orange pills can do. And I can't wait to treat you, my friend. It's like, what the hell is going on? You lose all authority, you lose all status, and people start to wonder, well, is this person an expert or are they simply a dancing monkey? So talk a little bit, what should agency principals do long before any sort of pitch to establish visibility, credibility, and authority in their marketplace? What's the Robert Patin prescription for properly positioning your firm so that you're not even considered in that same category of monkey show people?
So and I'm actually going to suggest something that is actually fairly common and known throughout the industry in a capabilities presentation. In Europe, they call it a credentials deck. And the thing that you actually want to do, what actually happens, and where I was talking about earlier, you have this hour-long presentation that, assuming that it's a qualified client, that part of your actual discovery or strategy conversation, whatever you call it, that sort of hour-long conversation for about 10 minutes, and only 10 minutes of the conversation, you're going to talk about your agency and what you do and why you're special and how it is that you work with clients, your process. And there's a couple of key points in this presentation. And again, I'm saying 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the absolute max. I mean, I've seen these credentials or capabilities decks be hundreds of pages long. And I'm talking maximum of 15 pages, maximum of 15 minutes. And you're talking about you and why you actually do the work that you do. And the goal of this is to hit a couple of things. One, you want to sell them on your process of what it is exactly and how your agency works. Because what happens so incredibly frequently is that clients will end up working with an agency, but feel quite out of control and unsure and try to take over the way that the agency functions. So you want to sell on your process and have them buy into it in the first place. Two, you actually want to make sure that the client understands why you actually care about them. So you're going to talk about how your work and why it actually provides meaning for you. And why do you actually care to help this particular industry, this particular client? What is it about the work that you really enjoy? And creates an alignment between you and the client that allows for them to feel more comfortable and safe. Then ideally actually showing them a bit about the team. So what happens a ton for agency owners is that you're selling based on your own personal knowledge, right? And the more that you sell on that, the client ultimately wants to talk to you. And so you want to try to pivot this a little bit to actually talk about the cumulative knowledge of your agency as well, and how you're actually selling a team and the wisdom of the team and how each one of your team members has some core expertise and why it's important and how they actually want to engage with the team in the first place. You're going to try to kill some of the really damaging things that happens in client relationships initially in the conversation. So you're raising authority in the relationship between you and the client. You're selling the process in that sales conversation as well. And then removing you as the agency owner as the core expert in the conversation, setting yourself up for success in the client relationship, assuming that they say yes. And then you can actually go into the more in-depth conversation in the sales conversation.
Brilliant. Really, really brilliant. I want to jump to a different topic, which is your books and where the books kind of came in and what prompted you to write the books and what people can expect to read in those books. So take us down your publishing journey.
Sure. So the first book I wrote came because I was recognizing that I could only work with so many people at the time. And what I was wanting to do, and at the time I was working solely with agencies that were 2 million plus. And I was working in a very high sort of touch level with them at the time. And I recognized I couldn't actually help everyone. So there was tons of people that I couldn't say yes to, and I was actually turning away. And how can I actually help these agencies that were perhaps not ready to actually work with me, to be able to work with me later, or ones that I would never meet and could never meet, to be able to help them and actually make some adjustments to their agency? So how could I actually help people? So I wrote that book, which is actually quite in depth, as it's called, The Blueprint, a blueprint of exactly how you can actually grow and scale. And that was the sort of my reason for actually writing the first one. And the second was that I recognized that there was lots of pieces in recognizing that the sort of stages that agencies grow, there's usually about a $500,000 to $700,000 sort of first line where agencies sort of hit that first sort of glass ceiling that a lot of agencies hit. There's that 1.5, and then usually 3 to 5, and then another one at 7. And recognizing that there's different problems. So I then wrote the practical agency for agencies that were sub $700,000 in revenue, of how to set up the sort of core foundation of the agency to allow for them to obtain that number, and then read the agency blueprint after that to being able to continue to scale.
Interesting. Well, and also your coaching, mentoring, and advisory services are also split this way, right? So 6 figures to 7. Once you hit that 7-figure mark, there's a whole different set of problems, whole different set of challenges based on the stage and the phase that your agency is in. Could you walk us through kind of what are the typical, 6-figure to 7 challenges, issues, problems, head trash, whatever it is? And then let's also go and we'll talk secondly about the 7 to 8-figure challenges, obstacles, head trash, and the genuine obstacles to helping them break through those different levels.
So from the 6 to 7 primarily is going to be, how do I actually position myself in the market? Who am I niching down with? Why am I actually doing the work these particular individuals? how do I set up pricing in the first place? And then how do I actually appropriately sell? And start to think about productization of the agency. So it's primarily around actually simplifying. So what most people believe around growing a business is I have to layer on tons of different things to allow for me to be able to have an attractive, scalable business. And so they're focused on how do I create all these systems? How do I make all of these things simple? But you have it so incredibly complex that you can't actually scale it that way. So it's around how do you get back to sort of core foundation of who you are as the agency owner, why you're doing what you're doing, and actually build a business that creates fulfillment in you and get to where you wanted to be in the first place and simplify your agency so that ultimately you can scale.
Talk about, because again, you and we've had discussions around this, right? Champagne problems, first world problems, that we are fortunate, we are blessed, we have a nice, big, healthy business, but we still got problems and we're still not at 8 figures yet, or, we're not where we want to be revenue wise or team wise or time wise or fulfillment wise or stress wise or any of these other things. So folks that on the outside look like, I wish I had your agency. I wish I had your team. I wish I had your life. And people go, no, you don't. No, you don't. I got all kinds of problems that are beneath the surface. What are some of those 7-figure to 8 challenges, both personally and professionally, for the agency owner?
So the core of it, I would say, is the level of distraction that the owner ends up facing. So what we end up actually working with them to solve is actually removing the need to be involved in so many things. So how we actually inject ourselves into the business to help them is that we actually establish core initiatives for the agency with every single department. And then rather than the agency owner needing to be the person that's directing and working and sorting out and figuring out exactly how to make that particular initiative, that particular system, that particular thing appropriately installed into the agency, we actually work with that department to actually help them and actually putting in that best practice. So working directly with the executives of the business so that the owner and CEO can be focused on that one core thing that they need to be doing rather than being pulled in 5, 6, 7 different things. What I have personally found to be true is that the more that I actually focus on one thing myself, the more that my business will actually continue to grow and scale. So I'm actually helping my agency clients actually allow for the owner to be focused on that one thing while still being able to do the other things that they're looking to be able to accomplish department by department. What I would say my sort of core genius of myself, and that sounds kind of bombastic, referring to myself as saying the word genius in the first place. But anyway, so what I would say that I'm really great at is because I never actually owned an agency myself, that I've only ever worked internally and consulted with countless of them at this point, is that I sort of look at, here's the 3, 4, 5 challenges that the agency is facing. And I can say, all right, I can look at the many dozens of great examples of how an agency can be run, considering all the different variables of that agency and kind of picking and choosing from the different examples of what I've seen and say, all right, here's the equation of what you need, allowing for us to build specifically what's necessary for that agency. It's like, hey, here's the retention problem that you're having. Here's the client profile that you have. Here's this. And I put together an equation. All right, now we're going to go install this system with this particular department, allowing for us to install it into the agency, figure out exactly what's going on, revise that strategy, and then ultimately at the end of that quarter, move on to the next strategy that now process and system can now live on its own and be taken over by someone else.
Yes. I'm guessing that part of this process also is you're able to bring your fractional CFO, CPA, X-ray vision, X-ray goggles, where, they're letting you sort of into what's really going on. You see some problems on the financial side that they do not see, whether it's profitability, whether it's team utilization, whether it's, hey, we're losing money on this particular kind of work. Are you aware of that? No, we thought we'd do more of that. What are some of the financial surprises that you sometimes will find in a growth partner client that they do not see or were totally unaware of?
So, I think everything I look at, right, being that my life, most of my career at this point has been spent in the accounting space, I look at everything that way, right? As I was describing earlier in this chat, that's who I am as a person, very analytical, numbers oriented. So everything I think about is in that sort of regard. How do we increase profitability? And how do we allow for us to be able to build a business that's as simple as it possibly can with the maximum amount of net profit? My goal with every client is at a minimum to be at a 25% net profit. To some clients are in the 40 to 45% net profit. For agencies, which in the agency space, the average is between 8 to 12 net profitability. So we're talking 2, 3, 4x that net profitability for my clients. What I would say more often than not is that the core sort of problem that the vast majority of agencies have is that anchor client that everyone is afraid to lose is actually more often than not their primary problem.
Mic drop right there, folks. So talk about what's the drain of this big, giant mega client that might be anywhere from 25 to 50% of your revenue? Is that a giant client?
I would say anything that's over 20% exactly is going to be a very substantial client. Some agencies even feel over 15%, but any of those clients that are, and I've seen it all the way up to 75% of revenue, which, ultimately for that business can be scary to lose, right?
Yes.
So you're making all the wrong decisions when it comes to that client. You're letting them dramatically go leaps and bounds and kind of just stamp all over your scope of work. You're not able to bring on more clients because you're constantly chasing what's actually going on with that anchor client, making a decision for a worse decision on an ongoing basis. And I mean, there's points in clients that I've actually looked at the original scope of work and the contract with that anchor client and looking at the reports that what they're doing with this client's like, they don't even remotely look the same. They're not even close to you're supposed to be doing branding and sort of chief branding officer type work for them, but yet you are doing ad management, media management, social media management, SEO. It's like they're not even remotely the same. And understanding you're completely priced it wrong, you're not looking at it appropriately. Your team is kind of chasing their tails a ton. And that particular piece of it is just, I see it so incredibly often that you need to, if you're in a position, and I'm not telling you, in certain instances, actually, I've had in one particular client where I actually told them that they needed to fire their anchor client because what I found is that they were losing about $4 for every hour that they were working on that client and didn't realize that they were. They were in a 65% with that anchor client and coming in and telling me, hey, I want you to fire 65% of your revenue. They looked at me like I was completely insane. But 6 months later, after having fired their 65% of their revenue, they had reclaimed that revenue, had tripled the percentage of net profit that they were at, and were just a completely different place because they were no longer sort of ball and chained by that anchor client.
Yes. Do you recommend, Robert, if they're in this situation, are there sometimes opportunities to switch to more of a strategic advisory role as opposed to, both the brains and the pair of hands, let the pair of hands work go and really help that client on a more strategic level to the tune of maybe a $20,000, $30,000 a month retainer, but it's strategic consulting and it's not, hey, we're going to be your be all end all hands-on agency?
I mean, I would say 100% that is always the sort of direction that I would personally want to go. I mean, it would depend on what that agency owner is looking to accomplish, really, right? But that would be my preference, is to go more strategic, high value oriented work, assuming that that's your core expertise. So what I would say to that, and depends on the client, because certain industries and who it is that you're serving don't want to talk with multiple agency partners. They want to talk with one. So the way by which, and many of you that may be listening that are an agency owner may be thinking this exact thing, right? Is that I need to be full service. I need to operate this way, is that you can offer just the strategic piece of it. Whereas you are actually managing the other agency partners. They still have a direct relationship. You may even get a percentage of that billing that the other agencies are charging and making money for not doing any of that hands-oriented work, that execution work, and not actually having to do it. So just doing the strategy-oriented, high-value work with the client, still allowing for them to not feel like they're being inundated working with 5, 10, 15 different agency partners. So you're still being the coordinator between them, allowing for them to have what they're looking for and still have that high-value work. that you want to do.
Yes.
Wait. We're not just going to listen to this episode. There are downloads, there are resources, there are links, there are bonuses waiting for you on this episode's page when you go over to doitmarketing.com/podcast. That's right, doitmarketing.com/podcast. Grab the notes right under this episode. See you over there.
Now, that's just one kind of recurring revenue. I know that another area of your specialty is helping agencies start thinking in terms of recurring revenue profit centers, not just project, done. Get the next project, get the next project. Recurring revenue. Talk to me.
So there are a number of things here, but I would say is that there's a lot of people in this current market that would say that reoccurring revenue for agencies is a thing of the past. And I would say that they could not be further from the truth, quite frankly. The thing that is happening in the industry right now is that a lot of people have started to move back. A lot of agencies have started to move back to project-oriented revenue. And realistically speaking, the client has no idea how they want to be operating and actually working with the agency in the first place. What ultimately every single person on the planet, every business owner that is working with any service-oriented business, what they want is the outcome. They don't care how, they don't care why, they don't care what, they just want the end result. That's all they care about. And if you're in a position where you're needing to replace a ton of revenue, and I want to get to, let's say that your agency has now gotten to 7 million and you're having to work with anywhere between 70 to 100 clients a year, having to replace those clients every single year becomes extremely arduous just to stay at the same size. Even if you're able to replace 30, 40, 50% of that revenue with reoccurring revenue clients, you have a baseline of revenue that's covering your operations. You know that you're consistently profitable. Any of the work that you do above and beyond that is just extra profit. And so that's sort of base level one that I work with all clients to get to, is get your operational costs covered at a minimum of 25% net profitability. And then every single project that you do above and beyond that is just additional profit for you.
Nice. Let's go back. I want to just, tie a ribbon around our whole conversation around sales and selling. What didn't we yet talk about that is part of the Robert Patin creative agency success sales playbook that is worth mentioning and sharing with folks, either as a mind shift or tactical, practical tactic?
So I would say one of the things that's really ultimately incredibly important here that the vast majority of agencies miss here in a sales conversation is their case studies are 100% just a portfolio. I want you to, and for listeners right now, think about if you are a creative agency, you're now expecting your prospective clients to become artistic and creative connoisseurs all of a sudden, that they understand the work here. And quite frankly, my belief system is without the context of the goal for that creative, there's no way for them to really understand why you made decisions that you did in that particular work. And so you're showing the work of here's a link to a website, or here's a screenshot of it, or here's the brand that we produced, without the context of why, what were you solving for, who the client was, all of that information. It's guiding the decisions that you make throughout the creative decisions that you make. And you just excluded all of it. It's nowhere to be found. And so every single piece of what you're actually selling and showing the client is 100% subjective. And so you're just leaving your sales conversation to chance. You know you can help them. You can do great work with them, but now you're expecting them to be able to understand the distinction between good work and okay work. And they don't. That's why they're talking to you. And so if your case studies right now are portfolio oriented, which 99% of this industry is, you're doing it wrong, and you need to look at how your case studies are currently written and remove the subjectivity from your work, from the prospect's perspective, allowing for them to really understand how you took and guided the client through your solution and got them to the end result. Remember, they're buying the end result.
So rather than a portfolio angle, it should really be a case study angle Here's what they wanted. Here's what they were challenged with. Here were their obstacles. Here's what they've tried before. Then they hired us, and here's the after, right? But specific dollars, hours, percentages, increase, improvement, all the good things go up, all the bad things go down. Here's the result of our creative work being deployed in the marketplace. Don't look at the pretty pictures. Don't look at the Pantone colors that we chose because they're on trend for 2023, by the way. No one cares about that. It's what's the value, the impact, the result, and the outcome of that creative work being deployed. Is that correct?
100%.
There you go. Totally fantastic. All right. As we're wrapping up, I got two final questions for you. The final question is, how can people get connected and stay connected to more Robert Patin brilliance? But before we go there, if folks were to take one overarching idea or concept from our talk today about true creative agency success, what would you love that core takeaway idea to be?
I'm going to switch that question just slightly.
Please.
If there's one thing that they could do today to make a change in the course of their business, what I would say is go back to your differentiator. Because I think one of the biggest problems in this industry at the moment is that every single agency started off by looking at their competitors in the space, the copy, the positioning, the way that they were being perceived. And that is why every single agency ends up sounding the same. They've all copied each other and it has become incestuous. Discard that. Do the actual hard work about your differentiator, about you, about why you are here, why your agency exists today, what actually gets you and your team out of bed. That is magnetic. Be more authentic, and it'll allow for people to actually want to work with you. And if you haven't done that yet, you need to do that today. There's nothing more important than actually making sure that you're attracting your ideal client.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Now, my final question. How can people get connected and stay connected to more Robert Patin brilliance and or the amazing work that you're doing with creative agency success? Links, resources, downloads, where can we send folks?
So I would go to my website, creativeagencysuccess.com. And if you actually click on resources on the site, there's loads of trainings, books, downloads, guides to analyze your agency, make sure that you are positioning yourself best in the market, and industry reports, all sorts of things that'll help you being able to really blow this year out of the water and hit your goals in the next 12 months.
Amazing. And also Facebook group, connect with you on LinkedIn. How about a personal connection? Anything there? What's your preferred platform of choice?
I would connect with me on LinkedIn, Robert Patin, and it's just linkedin.com/creative agency success.
Brilliant. Well, Robert Patin, you are a rock star. I appreciate you. Thank you for all the value bombs that you shared with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, bud.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.